Hello and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Thiago Da Costa. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Toric. We're a data company working primarily with general contractors. Today I have the pleasure to be talking to Maribeth Achterberg from the Boldt Company. Maribeth is joining me from Milwaukee. How do you align everybody on this need, especially around leadership and the culture to be able to bring analytics, to be able to bring all these things together and becoming a data-centric culture in the organization? How can the leaders foster that culture within the companies and organizations?
That's a very good question. And the answer has been the same for the decades that I've been in the IT space. So I'm just gonna reiterate it. Management has to measure the things that matter. And if we measure the things that matter, like in construction, exit margin erosion, that's a really important metric, right? Revenue is important, but your exit margin erosion is an extremely important metric. And so if you can get people lined up behind and measure the things that really matter to your organization, I could name other metrics, right? But it's the same concept. And then you say, okay, which processes contribute to that, and what information supports those processes, and what systems does that information reside in? And then how can I aggregate that all so I can calculate that particular metric? We continue with that example. So we can improve it because, of course, you want to improve your margin, right? Your profit margin at the end of every project, and that accumulates at the end as you aggregate that from a company standpoint. The most important thing that executives can do in construction and any other company is put people's focus on the metrics that matter and help them understand how they contribute to it. And you can't do any of that unless you have a good handle on your data, so that you can calculate accurate results. And it isn't, again, data in silos, right? It's data in the aggregate that gets you to that metric. So you really have to lay out the metrics that matter to your organization and then build that strategy of how you're using data against those metrics. And that's been the same for a really long time. It's just that it's hard and people don't like to think about it. They just rather go do what they do and then feel good about themselves, that I accomplished something. Well, did you really accomplish what the company needed? And can we measure that value that you created? It's really about value creation and measuring what matters.
That's great. That's a great management lesson there. It's like, if you start measuring the things you want to see as an outcome from people, then you might as well get that outcome or get people thinking in that way and then eventually evolve the culture too.
Yeah, I mean, I could use safety as another example, right? And there's a lot of cool technology in construction around that safety metric.
Hmm.
So, making sure you minimize lost time accidents.
Hmm.
You could put sensors in shoes. You could put sensors on a vest. You can put, sensors on hard hats and track people through that construction site to make sure they're not in
Yeah.
places they shouldn't be. Uh, there's really cool technology as far as exoskeletons and
Yeah.
making sure that you've got proper posture and that you're not putting that heavy load on a human frame, that you've got these exoskeletons that are the equipment is hanging off of, to reduce stress, wear and tear on the human body. I mean, there's so much cool technology that you could spend a lot of money and not achieve any real purpose for your organization if you don't define what those metrics are that matter to the organization. And that's what executive leadership's job is.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Basically, you could buy all the technology in the world, but if you're not measuring the outcome, then you can't even know if it's working. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
completely agree. Data analytics, let's shift gears to data analytics conversation and data privacy. There are significant concerns with privacy and security in construction for construction companies. So how can the companies strike a balance between leveraging data for decision making and ensuring that data protection and compliance are in place?
Yeah, and we deal with a lot of, like, in our organization, in construction management, you're dealing with a lot of outside entities. And, sometimes even a tradesperson will come onto a job site for a day, and you have to manage all of their personal information, their certifications. There's union concerns, and now states in the United States are actually adopting um, data protection and PII sorts of protective legislation. So there's actually quite a lot of intricacy in managing people's personally identifiable information and data privacy and data protection. Um, so it is an issue that I'm concerned about as we think about, HRIS systems and where should that information reside and who should have access to it. I think it plays into how you organize a data organization so that you have the right kind of expertise, like in a hub and spoke sort of a operating model, an organizational model, so that if you have specific expertise or regulations you need to be concerned about in HR, you've got people who have connection to a BI analytics organization in IT, but the specific uh, knowledge about those regulations sit in HR, sit with union and labor relations. So I think what I'm trying to say is uh, it pushes us to be even more integrated across functional silos because the regulation and the legislation, which I actually support, is becoming more and more specific about data and how we can use data and how data can be used to protect individuals. And the regulation, I should say, is being used to protect individuals. And we're a business that is leveraging information and knowledge resides in people. And so we have to really be, right, concerned about how we're protecting people's information.
It's a good analogy on both are information, but one is stored in a human brain and the other is digitally stored.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Um, so shifting to data analytics, there's a lot of, in the past few years, we have seen a lot of new technologies appearing around data analytics, and there's like a rapid evolution there, also with the advent of AI. How can companies that haven't yet fully adopted data stay up to date within these advancements, incorporate them into their data strategies effectively?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that the basics are super important before you go out and get your co-pilot license. You really do need to understand what this generative AI or large language models is going to be going after inside of your private data lake or data environment. So I would caution anybody just to grab for the next shiny object before they understand their own data and their own data environment. I think you really need to have a grasp on that and good governance. Now, do you have to have a perfection from a governance standpoint before you experiment? No, absolutely not. But at least understand where that data is coming from. And because if you don't have a good understanding of your data, when you start to employ some of these large language models, you won't know if they're hallucinating, giving the wrong feedback to you. So it's not a magic or a magic bullet. It does, though, help some organizations leapfrog if they haven't gone through a lot of the iterations previously to leapfrog over some of the old technology and to think past some of the old data warehousing kinds of architecture and approaches. So it may actually allow you to be a little more flexible in solving business problems, where in the past, you'd have to build out this pretty arduous architecture in order to answer some of those business questions. Um, but I just would caution, using AI or generative AI and not understanding your data will put you probably in a precarious place because you won't know if you've got a good answer to a business question. Does that answer where you
Yeah,
were?
absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I think adopting these technologies is everybody's trying to learn at the same time, right? I think like one aspect of it is construction, as you stated in the beginning, is a little bit behind manufacturing, which is, let's say, behind healthcare, which is behind finance. So there's like a
Right.
there's
Yeah.
like a staircase of like who's more advanced in data. And normally the companies and the industry that will be more data mature are going to be the ones that operate with data at the center, right? So finance, there's no other way. Like the actual asset is a digital asset for the most part. I mean, there's also, of course, other aspects of it, on currency management and all that, but the digital piece is really centric. So finance tends to be the most advanced in adopting a lot of these things, and then like we go down to fishing, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
And maybe farming. So like, as these things are evolving so quickly, like how can companies keep up to date with it? And then like, do they leapfrog the past and they jump directly into the new thing? Or
Yeah, I
um,
think you can from an architectural standpoint, in a data architecture. I think you can leapfrog the old and
yeah,
jump into the new. And I guess the way that I would encourage everybody to approach it is just choose a business problem that you can solve and define it tightly enough so you know what good looks like. Because if
mhm,
it's apple pie, motherhood and apple pie, you may not know when you've actually achieved a result or haven't, right? And everything comes down to making sure you're maximizing your investment. So pick a business problem that you can solve. And I would encourage, even, don't think you have to run all the way to large language models. Think about digital workers. What can you employ from robotic process automation that will create benefit for your organization, and just modeling out workflows that you can take the humans out, and then and put a digital worker in. In manufacturing, or I'm sorry, in construction, there is a lot of swivel chair rekeying of the same information from a project engineer to, say, a tradesperson to a project coordinator, to then getting it into your ERP system or your project costing system, whatever you're using. And sometimes it's duplicate entry in your project costing system and your project coordination system, like if you're using ACC. And it's like we just have a lot of redundant entry, which whenever you have that human factor, you have an opportunity for error.
right.
So even solving some of these very simple processes where you can reduce human factors, and making sure that a bot, which can maybe you just start rekeying the things, but you use a bot instead of a human, and that will free up a human to do higher level work, and it will improve your error rate. Start there.
Yeah.
That's simple. That technology has been around for a really long time. We just haven't applied it. And so you start there, and then maybe you start looking at things that you can do where you need to assess a lot of project documentation, so you can look at error rates, or lessons learned, or just, again, going back to that margin erosion metric. And you can start to understand where, so if I am automating this process, maybe I need to learn where there are other opportunities, and you start doing machine learning against a large data set of information. Start there. You don't have to jump right away to generative AI and try to figure out how you can use the latest technology. There are a lot of ways that you can create efficiencies in your business by leveraging technology that's been in market for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Maybe the intention wasn't there before, and now the intention is. So then you should use it with things that are potentially proven. And I mean, we're still trying to figure out how language models actually work in so many ways. So,
True.
um,
Yeah, absolutely. But one
maybe,
thing I would caution from a data privacy, and maybe you were driving at this earlier and I didn't catch it, just make sure you don't put your company's uh, proprietary information out into any of those large language models. I have one of the first things I did do when I joined 4.5 months ago was help publish a generative AI acceptable use policy for the organization. And there aren't any tools allowed on a Boldt asset that are not approved by me.
mm,
And no Boldt proprietary information is allowed out in a public generative
mm,
AI or large language model. once it's out there, it's out there. You can't put that genie back in the bottle. And so you really have to be careful about what you're exposing in the public large language models. I know there are lawsuits going on about what information was trained, with what model was trained with what information. It's like if it's in the public market, if it's out there, it is fodder
Yeah.
for these models. And so you really have to think about, what do I want out in the public space?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's all being discovered so quickly too. So, we're all kind of learning the risks together, and there's no legislation on top of anything. So,
Well, they're talking about it, right? Right away, they started talking about it. And I remember when the Chat GPT model was released,
yeah,
and the buzz was high. And I was actually asked to speak at a AI summit at a UW Milwaukee. And I think they wanted me to focus on really technical topics. And what I did focus on was the ethics
yeah.
of generative AI and what we should be concerned about as a society.
Thank you. This was very good. Thanks, Maribeth, for joining me today. For more interviews, please visit the CDO Magazine Tech website. We have done lots of different interviews with key leaders in the industry. So thank you for joining me today, and have
Thank
a good
you. I enjoyed it.